Happy LSU Pro Day, everyone. And while there were several LSU Tigers who went out for LSU's Pro Day and did some drills and showed off what they could do, you're looking at Avery Atkins, you're looking at Austin Deculus, you're looking at John Trey Kirkland, you're looking at Damon Clark, you're looking at Tyrion Davis-Price. There were several Tigers out there in the indoor practice facility today. But all eyes were on one. All of the talk was about one. And that was Derek Stingley Jr. There has been so much off-season controversy, pre-draft discussion about, is Derek Stingley the Derek Stingley from 2019? Despite injury, is he going to be able to compete and play at a high level in the league? It's a question that I have, and I'm sure it's a question that you had as well. But I think that a lot of our questions have been answered at the Pro Day today. We'll get into all of that and more on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I am an LSU alum. I've covered LSU football for several years, and I'm a diehard LSU fan. But now I am a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee for ESPN 1025 The Game, where I cover the Titans, I cover the NFL, I cover local sports here, the Vols, the Commodores, SEC football as a whole, college football as a whole, NHL, all of the above, you name it. We touch on it here in Nashville. But what I'm focusing in on today is LSU's Pro Day. And like I mentioned, there were several LSU players out there who were showing off what they can do, several NFL scouts that were there, NFL head coaches who were there who had questions for several LSU players. But all of the focus was on Derek Stingley Jr. And rightfully so, because he very easily could be the best defensive talent out of this draft. You're saying, well, in a draft with, Aiden Hutchison and Kayvon Thibodeau and Sauce Gardner, why isn't Derek Stingley getting the same amount of hype those players are? And it's because Derek Stingley has only played 10 games in the past 2 years. And we'll get into exactly what the concerns and fears are there later on in the show. But Derek Stingley has been riddled with injury over the past 2 years after an absolutely stellar 2019 freshman season. I mean, you look at his stats in 2019, he was top 5 in college football in interceptions, pass breakups, and opponent completion percentage as a freshman. As a true freshman, as an 18, 19-year-old kid here in 2019, Derek Stingley was an absolute shutdown corner. So let's focus in on what he did today during the Pro Day. His vertical, 38.5. Broad jump, 10.2. Solid, for real. Like, those are really good stats. But I think that the one thing that's most relevant to scouts, I think the one thing that's most relevant to us fans is his 40 time. First run, unofficial 40, was a 4.37. Second run, the official 40 time, was a 4.44. To put that into perspective, that's elite NFL speed. That is for a cornerback, for a corner. And I think we see so many wide receivers, quarterbacks even running the 40s at the NFL Combine, and they're in the 4.3, 4.4 range as a wide receiver. That is elite corner speed. To put that into perspective, some of the top corners in the NFL right now, Jalen Ramsey, for example, who I would say, I feel confident in saying that he is the best corner in the league right now. Jalen Ramsey at his Pro Day ran a 4.41. Tre'Davious White, our dear old friend Trey White up there in Buffalo with the Bills, ran a 4.40 in his LSU Pro Day. Stephon Gilmore, another elite cornerback in the NFL, also ran a 4.4. Trayvon Diggs, another one that I think that you can make the argument is one of the best, if not the best, corners in the NFL. Ran a 4.42. Look at Xavien Howard, who just signed a monster deal with the Miami Dolphins, who has very much so proved his skill and his worth for that team in Miami. Xavien Howard ran a 4.52 40 at his pro day. Looking at Derek Stingley Jr., unofficially ran a 4.37. While it's a number we'd love to go with, that's the unofficial number, so we'll go with 4.44 because that is the number that NFL scouts will go with. He's right along there with Jalen Ramsey, Tre'Davious White, Stephon Gilmore, Trayvon Diggs, Xavien Howard. Those are names that you hear week in and week out on Sundays. And Derek Stingley Jr. is doing it entering the NFL draft. Derek Stingley Jr. has elite speed. And you can add it, and absolutely the skills of just overall being a ball hawk. I mean, just the skills that he has with his hands, his ability to keep up with wide receivers and break up passes. Those are all intangible that Derek Stingley has. On top of that speed, but if you're looking for, a numerical or quantitative value attached to Derek Stingley, his 40 time is right there. And I've had another very interesting part of his pro day today. Now, admittedly, I was not there. I don't live in Baton Rouge. I wasn't able to make it there for the pro day, but I did as much research as I possibly could. And Derek Stingley ran wide receiver drills today. Now, he ran dummy routes, which dummy routes meaning he wasn't actually catching balls. He wasn't actually doing an all-in wide receiver drill, but he was running those dummy routes. So it just shows off his versatility, because that's what he's going to be doing week in and week out, is covering wide receivers. So as a corner, he has to think like a wide receiver. He has to know what that receiver is doing, where they're going, before that receiver even knows. And he has to get there quicker. That's what makes Derek Stingley Jr. so valuable, is he's so incredibly smart. He plays on the defensive side of the ball, but he has such an elite understanding of the offensive side of the ball that makes him so good at breaking up passes like that. So again, Derek Stingley Jr. in his pro day today, running a 4.44, official 40 time, unofficial of 4.37, which is a more fun number to go with. But of course, that's his unofficial. That was his first run. And he spoke with CBS Sports after his pro day today. And he was asked, were you pleased with your time? What did you expect going in today? And he said, was I pleased? No. And the reporter asked him, well, what did you want to run? Because it's really, a 4.2 is an absolute elite speed. Getting into that 4.3, 4.4 range is elite for a corner. He just said, faster. Didn't give it a specific time. Didn't list out exactly what he could have done better. He just said, faster. And I think that's another kind of intangible thing that Derek Stingley has, is whatever he does, even if it is elite, even if it is top of the NFL caliber, it can be better, it can be faster, it can be higher, it can be stronger. And I think that's the kind of mentality that NFL coaches love. And I think that's another part of Derek Stingley's game that just catapults him up in this draft, is just his ball hawk mentality and just always reaching for more. There's always more there. So Derek Stingley Jr. just with a lights out pro day today there at LSU, and would rank among some of the best in the NFL. Now coming up next, I'm just applauding over Derek Stingley Jr., just, falling over him. But recently, his draft stock has slipped a little bit. Now take every single NFL mock draft with a little bit of a grain of salt. So what's going on there? Why in mock drafts is he listed a little bit lower than, this NFL speed that would indicate that? We'll get into that. And what's the issue there? And why it really shouldn't be an issue. We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you all about Athletic Greens. It's a lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, whether you're paleo, whether you're vegan, you're dairy-free, you're gluten-free. I know so many people who have really difficult dietary restrictions, and it's really hard to find healthy alternatives, quick alternatives on the go that match with their lifestyle. But with Athletic Greens, they're lifestyle friendly. They're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, and gluten-free, and they contain less than only 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, and it still tastes delicious. I know for me, that's one thing that I've been focusing on, is trying to eat as clean as and clean and healthy as possible, but sometimes that's expensive and sometimes that's not always easy to do on the go. But with Athletic Greens, it only costs you less than $3 a day. So you're investing in your health. It's cheaper than going down to Starbucks and grabbing your $6.50 iced coffee. I am guilty of that plenty of times. And you're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/college. Again, athleticgreens.com/college to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether that's Apple's podcast, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Make sure to follow us there. And also, if you're on the go, if you're at work, if you're working out, whatever it may be, pop in a Spotify podcast or an Apple podcast. But you can also listen and watch on YouTube as well. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Locked On LSU, and you'll get notified as soon as those podcasts drop. So if you want to watch the podcast every day, feel free to do that on YouTube. Also, make sure to give our Twitter a follow at Locked On LSU, and also my personal Twitter at CarolineFenton1. I post my takes, updates, LSU thoughts on there daily, so make sure to give that a follow as well. But like I said, Derek Stingley, the talk of the town in Baton Rouge at LSU's Pro Day today, with an official 4.44 elite speed. I mean, NFL type of speed. But his draft stock has been falling a bit, and rightfully so. Derek Stingley has played 10 games in the past 2 years. Derek Stingley has been riddled with injury over the past 2 years and really hasn't shown much since his 2019 season, because in each of those 10 games over the past 2 years, statistically, it looked like he has been declining. Now, there's a lot of factors that you look into that. You look at just like the overall talent on the LSU team, the overall mismanagement of that coaching staff. I don't put that as much on Derek Stingley's ability or effort. I put it more so on him trying to work through injury and just being on a team that obviously was not as good as that 2019 LSU team, obviously. But Derek Stingley Jr. underwent a Linsfranc injury. Now, what that is, it's a foot injury, and I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be, but it's a foot injury. It's like a ligament kind of deal in the ball of your foot, from my understanding. He dealt with it in his sophomore year, came back, played 3 games, injured that foot again, underwent surgery, and has been rehabbing it since. Now, he was cleared from that injury at the combine, and he even said today, admittedly, he started feeling 100% like a couple days ago, a couple days before the pro day. So, I mean, if this kid can run 4.40 a couple days after he started feeling 100%, and after not being in game mode for 2 years, what can he do when he is in game mode and when he's 100% consistently over the next couple of months and couple of years? But that Linsfranc injury, it's absolutely been pushing his draft stock down. But I did some research, and the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine put out a study in 2015. So, a few years ago. But they took a sample size of 28 NFL players, all who dealt with Linsfranc injuries. And that was 17 of those defensive players, 11 of those offensive players. And of that sample size of 28 players who played in different teams across the league, different positions in the NFL, 2 never returned, 26 did. And of those 26 players who did return from injury, there was no significant statistical changes following the return. Again, that's coming from the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine. So I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be, but per the doctors who do study these things for a living and probably do it pretty well, a Linsfranc injury is something that players deal with quite frequently. And it's something that even more frequently players return from, and players can recover 100%. And I think I look at those 2 who never returned. Those are probably players who may have had severe injuries, and those are players who are probably later on in their career. It doesn't disclose what ages they were and how long they were in the league. But I'm looking at Derek Stingley Jr., who's 20, 21 years old. You bounce back a whole heck of a lot quicker at 21 than you do at 29, 30, 31, 32. So I look at that, and that really gives me a lot of hope. Look at Taysom Hill, for example. Taysom Hill, a few years ago, dealt with, for all you Saints fans out there, dealt with a Linsfranc injury not too long ago, and he's back 100%. So it's something that, it happens quite frequently. Derek Henry, for example, running back for the Tennessee Titans, dealt with a similar foot injury. He came back in the playoffs. Maybe wasn't 100%, but in this upcoming season will be 100%. So it's kind of like an ACL, for example. It feels traumatic when it happened, but through rehab and through surgery, you can come back, and not skip a beat. Of course, ACL is much more common than a Linsfranc injury. It's kind of a freak injury, but no issues with coming back. So that gives me a lot of optimism. But Ryan Clark spoke on Live earlier, and don't just take it from me, but take it from Ryan Clark as well, who said, whatever team is looking at Derek Stingley, whatever teams are interested in Derek Stingley, injury aside, they're getting one hell of a player. This was Ryan Clark on NFL Live on Wednesday morning.
Listen, the atmosphere was all about Stingley Jr. You knew so many people, so many defensive coaches, head coaches were there to see if he still had the fight, to see if he still had the skill. Did the explosiveness in person match what they saw on tape his freshman year? And he checked all of those boxes. And honestly, Laura, what I saw from Derek Stingley Jr. is the same thing I've been seeing from him since he was 15. He is phenomenally talented. He's a guy who can step right on the field. And when we're talking about skill for skill, measurable for measurable, be with anybody who's playing in the NFL right now. This kid has Jalen Ramsey, Stephon Gilmore type potential, but it's about seeing it right out of the gate. Derek Stingley was born to do this. I think everybody is wondering which Derek Stingley you'll get, and today he showed them at least the guy you get has every bit of the measurables that you need to be successful.
And hey, it's admitting the fact that, look, we get it. NFL coaches, NFL GMs out there, we get it. If you're concerned about Derek Stingley Jr., because I am always so incredibly weary of drafting injured players as an NFL team. But I think today proved that any concerns or reservations that you may have physically about Derek Stingley, I almost said Derek Henry, Derek Stingley, those should be dissipated, because looking pretty damn good after only being 100% for a few days. And also that mentality. Derek Stingley spoke with the media today and said, I want to be the best. I will do whatever it takes to be the best. And it just kind of goes along with not just the intangibles physically, but also the intangibles mentally, emotionally, and just personality-wise as well. You're getting one heck of a player. And Ryan Clark pointed out something very important that I think maybe goes unlooked a lot. Derek Stingley is just one addition in his lineage of another player who's going to play football at an incredibly high level. And I think that's pretty important to know that he comes from a family of football players of that NFL mentality, because it really is a different kind of mentality. That is a different type of mind to be able to play football at that high of a level. So I think that Ryan Clark makes a very good point there, and that this isn't a kid that's just going to give up. This isn't a kid who is just going to say, dang, you know what? This is really hard. I'm facing a lot of adversity with these injuries, so I'm good. No thanks, NFL. He comes from a long line of NFL dogs with his father and grandfather. So I think that it is going to be no problem for Derek Stingley to get back into game shape. But all of this talk about Derek Stingley entering the NFL and no talk of where he's going to land. So coming up next, we'll get into exactly how or where we can expect to see Derek Stingley land in the NFL draft, what he's looking like in the mock drafts, what can we expect on draft day. We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I got to tell y'all about Bet Online. And Bet Online is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. So I know the NCAA tournament has passed. That's one of my favorite events to bet on every single year. But we still got the Masters coming up this week, another really great and fun event to bet on. So make sure to do that with betonline.net. They've got the Masters Championship odds, they've got podcasts and reviews for all the different leagues this season. And BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Esports has been blowing up recently, so if you want to get into that, kind of make some money here and there on esports, I totally recommend that. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And coming up on tomorrow's show, we'll get into a little bit more of LSU's Pro Day today. Focusing on Derek Stingley, the shining star of the day on LSU's Pro Day. But we'll get into more of what we saw from Austin Deculus, from Damon Clark, from other players wearing the purple and gold on Pro Day. But all of this talk about Derek Stingley's comeback, all of this talk about about Derek Stingley in the NFL, but where exactly is he going to end up? Now, CBS Sports in a full report on Derek Stingley today. Here's what CBS had to say about Derek Stingley's potential in the NFL.
One scout who has his team has a pick in the top 10 said, after watching him today, let's not complicate things, period. If he's there, they're going to take him. And I was told if he even flopped today, he would have gone in the top 25. He's that much of a physical specimen, freshman All-American as a freshman in 2019. We know about the injuries, but 3 years out of high school, he's a fantastic specimen.
Even if he flopped in his pro day, he still would have gone top 25. That is just how impressive Derek Stingley is in his 2019 season and how much that's carried over to now into the NFL draft in 2022. And also, just his makeup and what he's been able to do, and also that off the field stuff as well. Just a really, good head on his shoulders. So that was really shocking to me. I guess not shocking, but I guess refreshing is the right word to use here. Hearing that even if, he just absolutely stunk up the place, NFL scouts still would have been impressed with Derek Stingley and still would have been willing, maybe not as high in the draft as maybe we initially anticipated, but still would have gotten top 25. But looking at some of the mock drafts that have been put out over the past couple of weeks, one consensus that I have heard is that Derek Stingley Jr. will not fall into the second round. That there is going to be at least one team in the first round that is going to pick up Derek Stingley. And I think even if that's a team that isn't in need of a defensive back, you're getting a damn good player for the future to develop. So I don't see him falling into the second round. I don't think any of the draft gurus do either. Now, a few mocks that I've looked at. First and foremost, Pro Football Network has Derek Stingley going to Philadelphia at 16. Dalton Miller, NFL analyst, has Derek Stingley going to Houston with the 13th pick, and that would not surprise me if Houston was looking for a corner, because in this past year, Houston had was last place in defensive back drop rate. So, Houston is just kind of a dumpster fire of a team right now. I'm sorry if there are any Texans fans out there listening. They're in a really tough position. The question marks at the quarterback position, changing of the guards at the head coaching position, just a lack of draft picks in the 2021 draft has left them pretty barren on their roster. So I would hate to see one of our own go into kind of a difficult situation in Houston, but going with the 13th overall pick is absolutely a testament to who Derek Stingley is and what he can be in the league. But one kind of consensus pick that I've seen from a lot of the draft gurus, looking at CBS, Sports Illustrated, Bleacher Report, has him going number 12 overall to Minnesota. Let me just say, LSU's got to chill, pumping out these draft picks, and LSU's got to chill with putting a bunch of different LSU players across different years on the same teams, because I start losing money on all of these jerseys that I bought. I've already got a Cincinnati Bengals jersey, and if Derek Stingley is going to join Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, I'm going to have to get one of the purple jerseys as well. That's not something that I want to do, but you know what? I will do it. But going 12th overall to Minnesota, pretty solid choice there. Now, a couple things that have been concerning of me. I see Bucky Brooks of NFL.com slating Derek Stingley Jr. going to Washington. I think that Washington is such a dumpster fire of an organization. Again, apologies to any Commanders fans out there. I would hate to see Derek Stingley going into that kind of situation because I think the ownership is an absolute mess. I love Ron Rivera as a head coach. I don't like Carson Wentz as a quarterback. I think that Washington is so far away from being set up to being a winning franchise. I don't want to see him going there. Another thing, ESPN's Mike Tannenbaum has Derek Stingley Jr. slated to go 24th to Dallas. And, I mean, can you imagine that Cowboys backfield with Trayvon Diggs and Derek Stingley Jr.? Holy moly, good luck to the rest of the NFC East. However, Dallas picks at 24. I would be shocked if Derek Stingley Jr. falls all the way to 24. But if he's there, I mean, Dallas has got to pick him. Wherever he is, I mean, if he slides past like 15, I think that whatever team gets him is going to absolutely get a bargain pick. So while I think it'd be awesome to see Derek Stingley in a Dallas Cowboys uniform, I think it'd be awesome for him to learn from Trayvon Diggs. I don't see him falling that far. But another quick NFL nugget that I heard today was that Brandon Staley, head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, who pick at 17 this year, asked about Derek Stingley Jr. And he said that he was keeping an eye on Derek Stingley just to make sure that that passion was still there, to make sure that that fire was still there. So I do think that, seeing that his pro day today, absolutely it is evident that that fire is still very much so. But that is going to do it for me today. Like I said, tomorrow's podcast will take a little bit more of a deep dive into what did the rest of these potential NFL LSU hopefuls look like at LSU's Pro Day, and we'll also preview LSU baseball's weekend series this weekend. A huge win against Grambling in their midweek games. We'll take a look at that as well. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft, as we've had so much NFL Draft talk today. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.